Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Movie Impressions, where I go see a recently released film and share my first thoughts on it. Today, I'll be sharing my impressions of Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. I made this video as spoiler-free as I could, so you won't find many here. With that said, on to my impressions. I'll start out by saying that I really like this movie, and it's certainly one of the best Star Wars movies in years. Even better than Force Awakens, in my opinion. Mainly because of the risks this movie took that I never expected Disney to do. First off, if you're looking for a Star Wars movie that's like all the others I have here, then this is not the movie for you. This is not the movie you're looking for. This is actually the type of movie that I've wanted to see for quite a while. A Star Wars movie that isn't really a Star Wars movie. It just happens to be set in that universe. In this case, it helps set the stage for the original film. This film is much darker than the rest of the Star Wars movies, truly earning its PG-13 rating. Unlike the main saga movies that focus on the Jedi and the Sith, or at least the light and dark side of the Force, this film it focuses on the military aspects and how regular non-Force sensitives were affected by the Empire. And yeah, this is a flat-out war movie. This is evident as there are no Jedi in this film, and there's only one Sith in the form of Darth Vader, who doesn't get a lot of screen time, but oh boy does he make his presence known. I'll get more on that in a little bit. But I will say, this is perhaps the scariest I've ever seen Vader. And he has some of the best scenes in the movie. Mainly towards the end. And we see just how powerful and intimidating he is, especially when in comparison to non-Force users. Oh yeah, and his temper and anger at his finest. Oh man, this is just really good. And yeah, in the film, it features many decent characters, though most are forgettable, and that was possibly intentional, though some did leave quite an impression. For example, one of the main characters in the film is a droid thrown in for comic relief. And he succeeds in his job by stealing the show, showing that droids are easily the best form of comic relief in Star Wars, unlike a certain living character who was supposed to be for comic relief in the prequel trilogy. He is funny as hell and appears in all right moments, especially given how dark this movie is, especially at certain times. As I said earlier, Rogue One is a war movie that just happens to have the Star Wars universe as a backdrop. Given that it's set in said universe, there are a few references to other Star Wars movies, an example being a few characters. For instance, we see brief cameos from R2-D2 and C-3PO, so far making these characters among the only characters to appear in every Star Wars movie, and making it certain that Anthony Daniels will likely be the only actor in every major Star Wars movie. And along those two crooks you see in Mos Eisley and New Hope, the one that Obi-Wan literally disarms. There are even a few references to the Clone Wars and Rebels TV shows, which I recommend both shows, by the way, even though in the Clone Wars case, the pilot was absolute garbage. But the show was definitely not. The show was excellent, but anyway. Yeah, for Rebels, you see the ship, the Ghost, which is pretty much the main ship in Star Wars Rebels. You see it towards the end in the final battle. And we also see Saw Gerrera from the Clone Wars TV show, who in the Onderon arc. Other returning characters include Governor Tarkin, which makes sense given how close he was to the Death Star project from the very beginning, and that he practically oversaw the whole thing. From when its construction started around Revenge of the Sith, all the way through, he was literally through it to the end because he was on it when it blew up. and he is by far one of my favorite things in Rogue One. And as the actor they got to play him, he did a really good job of capturing how intimidating Peter Cushing's portrayal was. He would be proud if he was still alive to see this. As I mentioned earlier, Darth Vader also makes a few brief appearances. And all the characters that make appearances are Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, both played by the same actors who played them in the prequel films. And the film, it shows just how the Empire affected the entire galaxy, such as seeing them mine for kyber crystals without a second thought given to people living on the planets or they mine, or any planet in the galaxy for that matter. That's apparent enough if you've ever seen Star Wars Rebels. Now, of course, one of the main focuses is the Rebel Alliance, showing just what they had to do while in the middle of the war and in time of tyrannical rule. And the Alliance, how do I put this, is not exactly painted in the best light, though as the film shows, it shows them going through desperate measures just to survive, and that they had to do what they had to do. And like I said, this is a straight up war movie, and it shows the sacrifices that had to be made for people on both sides, even in terms of morality, to ensure freedom and peace in the galaxy, and give a new glimmer of hope. Now, of course, its plot, as most of us know by now, revolves around the theft of the Death Star plans, leading up to the events of the original film. Yeah, that battle described in the opening crawl of A New Hope, you see that here. And of course, given when this movie takes place, it fills in a few plot holes, such as how the Empire managed to somehow overlook such an obvious design flaw in the Death Star. I mean, seriously, an exhaust port leading directly to the reactor, and no one saw fit to double check these designs. I mean, they still overlooked it, but it's more explained here why. And it also indirectly confirms the project timeline of the Empire. It does things like mentioning the delays the first Death Star had, which we expected. And since it made no mention of there being another one, it leads us to assume that the second Death Star's construction literally, it did begin at some point after A New Hope, when the first one was destroyed. And does somewhat confirm why the first Death Star took almost 20 years to build when the second Death Star only took 4 years. But even then, it wasn't even finished, so it might have taken a little bit longer to complete it. And the movie itself, it ran at a pretty decent pace, especially towards in the second and third acts of the film and the climax. And it has a lot of action, easily the most action-packed of the entire saga. And my favorite part, and easily the best part of the movie, is that final act, which depicts the battle where the Alliance stole the Death Star plans, as stated, which the battle that is briefly mentioned in the opening call of A New Hope. And how can I say this without spoiling anything? The space battle in this movie is one of the best I've ever seen, and it's easily up there with the space battle from A New Hope, which I've yet to see a Star Wars movie top, though this one comes close. Not quite, but close. And that's especially true once Vader shows up and makes his presence known. And there's something I've wanted this movie's ending to do ever since it was announced, and boy, did they do it! What I want to do is see him end it with the opening, and basically end this movie with the opening scene of A New Hope, and that's pretty much almost exactly what they did with this movie. The ending scene is almost literally the opening scene from A New Hope, making this the most literal prequel you can get. Now, what are my final thoughts on it? And my final verdict? It's an easy 8 out of 10. An excellent film that I recommend you see, that, if for nothing else, the battle at the end. And how I rank it in comparison to the other Star Wars films. That's hard to do, as Rogue One is almost nothing like the others. And I enjoyed it much more than some of the other movies. This is coming from a guy who likes all of the first 7, with the exception of Attack of the Clones. I mean, I never liked that movie. I can never stand it. But that's a subject for another story, for another time. And I definitely ranked this above Force Awakens because I respect it more because they took all these risks. And Force Awakens, I knew they had to retread it because they were opening us up to a new audience. But still, they could. There are a couple of ways they probably could have done, but I'm not going to get into it right now. But I'm not sure if I like this better than Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi quite yet. I'm still debating that. And because if I find it better than those two, then I'll rank this directly below A New Hope. which is still my favorite Star Wars film, and I've yet to see it change. Though I want to see Disney try to make a movie better than A New Hope. I hope they do. Anyway, the last thing I'll say is that I want to see more anthology films like this, especially ones that are set in the Star Wars universe that aren't part of the main saga. Because George Lucas created such a huge universe that was covered greatly in Legends. Well, unfortunately, most of that stuff was tossed out, and they need to rebuild some of that, especially the Old Republic. Please, Disney, if you do anything, revisit the Old Republic era. Doesn't necessarily have to be in a movie, but just revisit that era, either in a movie, TV show, whatever the hell you feel like you do. Bring that stuff back into canon, or at least some aspects of it. Well, okay, I'll stop this before this gets derailed anymore. Yeah, that's my first impression of Rogue One. A really good film, and I highly recommend seeing this. And I might even go see this movie a second time, possibly after the holidays and New Year's, which is something I rarely do. Actually, I don't think I've ever done that for that matter. Not in the theaters, anyway. And I cannot wait to add this to my collection alongside the others I have on top of my desk here. Well, until next time.